All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do a quick review over Unit 3 for AP World History Modern. The credit for who made this PowerPoint is in the comments of the YouTube video. I'm going to now start this by saying like and subscribe because why not? The last PowerPoint we did, well, the first one was a kind of a review over AP Units 3 and 4, but this is going to really just concentrate on the Unit 3, the land-based empires between 1450 and 1750. We're going to do this kind of quick because there's just a lot of stuff we've already covered, especially in that really long one. So hopefully this one won't hit an hour because, as you know, Ms. Saunders tends to hit an hour when she talks. All right, let's do this one. So the subunits in this is there's four. Like 3.4 is kind of like a review of all of it, but you've got the empires expanding, you have the empire's administration, and empires their belief system. So let's go over it. Here's that nice little map from Freemanpedia. It tells you kind of where the Taj Mahal is, the Blue Mosque, the Versailles. Versailles is going to be like in France. St. Basil's, I might be saying that incorrectly, but who cares? Just kind of a good idea to know where all of these are. You can look at them in your own time. Freemanpedia is always a really great website to go to. Modern Europe is going to take shape during this time. Of course, we now know it looks slightly different than this map right here, but this is a good map to look at, and you can always look at this PowerPoint on my website. All right, time to go into the Protestant Reformation. Let's start a new church. 40,000 of them. Ah, it's Martin Luther. What a great time. All right. So Europe's medieval period, we've gone over this before. You have very few kingdoms. You have feudalism. Local lords are all in charge. The Catholic Church controls these lords, and the Catholic Church is under the Holy Roman Empire. So the church is competing with the Italian princes for political power. So you have the state versus the church. They hoarded money to build more churches. They fight in wars. They're plotting against powerful monarchs. So we've got Philip IV of France. He actually arrests one of the popes in 1302. The church is selling these things called indulgences. You pay the Pope money, he gives you a piece of paper that gets you out of purgatory quicker. The purgatory idea, if you're not familiar with it, is this idea that it's kind of like an in-between between hell and heaven. So after you die, it's kind of like this decision place. Like, are you going to go to hell? Are you going to go to heaven? So if you pay a little extra money, you're going to get out of purgatory quicker and get to go to heaven. Ooh, awesome. Yay. But this doesn't really work if you're not a rich person. So you're kind of going, wait a minute, this doesn't seem very fair. So you have these early reformers. So due to harsh life and the bubonic plague, people, of course, start to question the church. We've talked about the Renaissance. We've talked about humanist ideas. Talked about in the last two PowerPoint videos that we've gone over. One of the first reformers is this guy named Erasmus. He's a Dutch Catholic priest. He remains Catholic his whole life, but he wants to fix the church and return it to its simpler, less worldly ways. Less worldly means less of this idea of paying to get into heaven. He stresses this idea of studying the Bible. So the big question is, why was Bible study so difficult for the average person back then? Well, not a lot of people could read. And also, Bible wasn't getting printed that much. If you wanted to learn about the Bible, you had to go to your priest, and your priest told you what the Bible said. It wasn't until really the last 100 years the Catholic Church stopped doing like a main like Latin mass. Now the Catholic Church does a mass in every single language depending where you go to a Catholic mass. But 60, 70 years ago, Catholic Church, no matter what country you were in, it was still in Latin. So it's kind of a big deal. If you didn't understand Latin, you weren't going to learn the Bible. And if you couldn't read, you had to rely on your priest to tell you what the Bible said and what it meant. So Bible study was very difficult for the average person. But Erasmus is saying, no, we have to really practice and learn the Bible, not pay to go to heaven. So Martin Luther, he lives from 1483 to 1546 in Germany. No, you don't need to know when he was born and when he died. You need to know, okay, it was late 15th century, early 16th century. It's from Germany. Father encourages him to study law, but he has this sudden religious experience that inspires him to become a monk. He becomes troubled over the possibility of not going to heaven. Like, oh my gosh, whatever shall I do? He turns to the Bible and the idea of confession for comfort in the Catholic faith. You go to your priest and you confess your sins. In the Bible, he finds the answer he's looking for. In Romans 1:17, it says the righteous shall by his faith. So Luther realizes that only faith in the ultimate goodness of Jesus, not good deeds, could save a person. No good works, rituals, etc. would save a person if they did not believe. So if you're a Christian, you may believe in the fact that if you believe in Jesus, that just believing he died for your sins, you go to heaven. Well, it wasn't always what it used to be. This idea of believing in Jesus, you go to heaven, is not what it always was. Like all things, religion has evolved. Prior to Martin Luther and the Catholic Church, they controlled how you got into heaven. The idea was, prior to Martin Luther, if you keep your priest happy, you're good. And how do you keep your priest happy? You pay him. Not only that, but you have to pay to be baptized, you have to pay to be married, you have to be paid to be buried on holy ground. And every week you also have to work on the church land for just some time, like a few hours. But if you're rich, you would pay to get out of that service. So today, in most Christian religions, Christian faiths, as long as you believe that Jesus dies for your sins, you're good. Yay. So who do we have to thank for this evolution of faith? Martin Luther. So he takes the 95 theses, he creates them, their complaints. He criticizes the power of the Pope, the extreme wealth of the church, and these ideas of indulgences. He uses the Gutenberg's printing press to print multiple copies of his theses. He hangs them on the church doors on October 31st, 1517, passes them out to the people in the streets. Everyone's reading this or getting people to read it to them. It's a huge deal. So Luther goes on trial, the Diet of Worms. Talked about this in that really long video I did a long time ago. But a month ago, 1520, Pope Leo X, which, by the way, he was born Giovanni di Lorenzo di Medici. Pope Leo X was one of the Medicis. He orders Luther to give up his beliefs. Luther burns the order and was excommunicated. He went into hiding where he translated the New Testament into German, spreading his beliefs even further. Because remember, the Bible probably wasn't going to be in German. It was probably in Latin. But remember, that just wanted to point that out. Pope Leo X was one of the Medicis. We should know about the Medici family by now. So Protestantism is born. Some local German churches accept his ideas. Lutheranism is formed. They're supported by the German princes who issue a formal protest against the church for suppressing the reforms, and these reformers become known as Protestants. That's the word protest right there. Right there in the word, Protestants. Fantastic. Luther's dying words. I am fed up with the world and it with me. I am like a ripe stool and the world is like a gigantic anus, and so we're about to let go of each other. Finer words have never been spoken. That's sarcasm. Anyway. John Calvin. So kind of like him, a little bit of a reformer. He's influenced by Luther. He disagrees with his salvation through faith alone mantra. So remember, the idea of a lot of Christian faiths are if you believe in Jesus, you're good to go. Well, he's like, not so much. You're close, but not quite. He believes in the fact of like this idea of predestination. So he says, no. God has determined whether or not you're going to go to heaven or not, even before the moment you are born. So he says, because we don't know if we're going to go to heaven or not, we must lead a purified way of living. So don't drink, don't swear, don't gamble, no card playing, because everything is a sin. So if you're going, who could possibly live like this? You may have heard of them. They're called pilgrims. We'll get to them a little bit later. Pilgrims, Puritans. Anyway. So here you go. Your Calvinism spin-offs. England, you have the Puritans. Scotland, you have the Presbyterians. Holland, they are known as the Dutch Reform. France, the Huguenots. Germany, you have the Reformed Church. You have the Anabaptists. They believe in the separation of church and state, but they don't believe in baptizing infants. And the Lutheran and Catholics both, of course, despise the Calvinists. So I guess I'll go into a little bit right now. If you've heard of Puritans, they come from England, and the Pilgrims, of course, came from England. They both follow Calvin, but Puritans thought the Church of England was just a little too Catholic for their liking. So when they split off, they become separatists. So they leave England in 1607. They go to the Netherlands. And then even the Netherlands are like, nah, brah, you guys are just a little too wacky for our liking. So they go over to America in 1620. The remaining ones that are still in England, the Puritans, they actually end up cleansing the Church of England of any leftover Catholicism in the end. So that's what ends up happening to the Church of England. Remember, we talked about it in our first big video that Henry VIII, the real split of the Church of England, it was just Catholicism with Henry VIII as the lead of it. That was it. But then over time, it does become very less Catholic. So they're the ones who basically help cleanse the church of its leftover Catholicism. So we have the religious wars. They begin. Germany, you have Catholics and Lutherans are going against Calvinists. France, you have the wars between the Catholics and the Calvinists. Netherlands, Calvinists. Don't like them. England, some Calvinists, remember, fled to America for their religious freedom. And Scotland, Calvinist John Knox overthrew the Catholic Queen. What a time to be alive. This is a nice little picture. We've got several others, but if you ever want to really zoom in, you can see how religion just split off into all these different sects of Christianity. Take that time on your own time, look it over. Oh, by the way, you don't need to know it all. Not for the AB exam do you ever need to know all this. It's just kind of nice to look at. All right, English Reformation, Henry VIII. Remember, married Catherine, who was his brother's wife. And then he wanted a divorce because he met this really, oh my gosh, adorable woman named Anne Boleyn. And he was like, oh my gosh, girl, what's up? Can you give me a son? She was like, I can totally do that. She doesn't, by the way. She gave him Elizabeth. So Catherine was like, oh, whatever, divorce, whatever. But the Pope was like, no, you're going to be married to her. So Henry takes over the church, makes his own church, the end, the Church of England, also known as the Anglican Church. And he just gets Elizabeth. Sorry. Absolutist monarchs. So many of you in my class have picked this up. I'm so proud of you. So let's just go over this real kind of quick. Louis XIV, he takes power of France in 1643 at the age of 5. Cardinal Mazarin was a chief minister. If you want to know what a chief minister is, they essentially just carry out the orders of the king. So in 1661, he passes away. Louis takes absolute power. He takes the sun as his symbol. He's known as the Sun King. Just like the sun sits in the center of the universe, so do I at center of nation. Again, my terrible French. L'état, c'est moi. I am the state. I think I said it better in the first video. Good luck to anyone who can say it better than me. If you're French, you're cheating. All right. How powerful is he? He expands the bureaucracy. He appoints these royal officials who collect taxes. Remember, we've talked about this before. In order to maintain power, you want to appoint people to go out there and collect taxes for you. This is a way to maintain power. Make sure you know that in your heads. He builds the strongest standing army in Europe, and high-ranking nobles would compete for the privilege of waking him up, putting him to bed, dressing him, feeding him, and even giving him a bath. Why? Why? Well, think of it this way. There was no TikTok. There was no internet. There wasn't much else to do. So you're either going to live in poverty or you're going to live in a lap of luxury. And in order to live in a lap of luxury, you want to be in his good favor. So if you're going to be in his good favor, you're going to compete to be his best friend. And to be his best friend, you have to, oh, please, King Louis, let me be the one to put your socks on. I know it sounds crazy, but when there's nothing else to do, that's the height of entertainment. Just go with me here. So Versailles, he moves the royal palace from the modern-day Louvre and Central Palace to his dad's old hunting grounds 12 miles outside of Paris. He builds it the grandest building in Europe. It was a show of wealth and power. It's adorned with gold, and the symbols of the sun are everywhere. He forces the French nobles to live in the palace with him for part of the year. Their families have to stay home. They can't stay with him. And he helps pay for Versailles by forcing his nobles to pay him rent, which, smart, but also annoying. You got to give him that much. Here are some beautiful pictures of it. Yes, you can go see it today. And if you're going, Miss Saunders, I'm not going to go to France to see this opulent palace, that's okay. I put videos. And actually, I didn't put the videos. Somebody else put the videos here for you, but they're great. You should check them out when you get a chance. And by checking them out, I mean go to my website to check them out. There's this one, and then there's this one. Both really good. So Britain was also doing it. We have the Tudors. So every we've talked about like the Manchus and all these different dynasties and all sorts. Well, England has its own kind of dynasties, and the Tudors were Henry VIII, Elizabeth I. They end up working closely with British Parliament. Elizabeth dies childless in 1603. So James Stuart, who's the King of Scotland, he was like James the Fourth or James the Sixth or something like that. He was like a cousin or something. Becomes James the First of England. He immediately clashes with Parliament. He's like, not working well with you. He wants to separate from the Church of England and go back to being Catholic. The Puritans are like, no, 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 no. We got rid of this. This is ridiculous. So they're in the middle of trying to purify the church of all the Catholic practices already. So they don't know why he's doing what he's doing. Charles I inherits the throne in 1625 when his dad dies. So he's like his father, he wants to be an absolute monarch. He dissolves Parliament in 1629, giving himself absolute political power, but not economic power. So in 1640, he has to summon Parliament to get back together to get money to suppress this rebellion that's happening in Scotland. This leads to what is known as the Long Parliament. Now, I'm giving you this because it's context. If you're going, oh, my son is trying to write all this down, it's context to kind of give you an idea as to what's happening in Europe. If you really, really, really want to know absolutely everything about this, then what you need to do is take AP Euro. So Parliament's in session from 1640 to 1653, hence the name Long Parliament. In this session, Parliament tries and executes many of Charles' chief ministers. In 1652, though, Charles leads troops into the House of Commons. If you're going, well, I don't know what the House of Commons is, think of the House of Commons like the House of Representatives. Those are people that, are elected officials and make decisions. So he leads them in there to arrest the members of Parliament. Many escape through the back door, but this brings on the English Civil War. It's about to get real messy, y'all. So the Civil War goes from 1642 to 1651. The two sides are the soldiers for the king. These are the wealthy nobles with the plumed hats and the fashionable long hair, very skilled in fighting. And the Roundheads. Those are the soldiers on the Parliament side. They're manufacturers, clergy members. They're not as skilled. They're called the Roundheads because their hair was cut close to the head. So Oliver Cromwell is the leader of the Roundheads. Roundheads. Those are the Parliament guys. They defeat the Cavaliers, so he has Charles I executed. The House of the Commons take power. They begin the Republic of England. Oliver Cromwell is chosen as the leader. He gives the Puritans more power. They have religious tolerance for the Jews and for the Catholics. So, good times, right? Sundays are set aside for religious observance. However, so everyone's like, woo, we're tolerant, except if you're caught working on a Sunday, you're going to be fined. There's no theaters, no taverns, no gambling, no dancing. Absolutely terrible time, especially if you know an English person. We need our theaters, we need our taverns, we probably need gambling, and dancing seems like a fun time. Charles II. So Cromwell dies in 1658. People are sick of the strict rules, so they invite Charles II to come back. Charles II, of course, is the son to Charles I. He arrives to cheering crowds. The monarchy is restored, and he's very popular. And he believes in an absolute monarchy, but he learns from his father's mistakes. So he says, okay, I'm going to work with Parliament rather than work against them. Because if I work against them, I may lose my head. Just going to throw that out there. So James II, after Charles II dies, his brother actually takes over. Talked a bit about this the last time. He inherits the throne in 1658. He practiced his Catholic faith very openly, and he starts to scare Parliament because he's so open about it. They think he's going to bring it back, and they're just like, this is not going to be good. So they actually invite his daughter and her husband to return and rule England. They land with their army. James flees to France, and the bloodless overthrow is known as Glorious Revolution. And those of you that know, of course, we talked about this last time, the College of William and Mary is named after William and Mary. So the English Bill of Rights, they agree to sign this as, before even getting power, they give the majority of their power to Parliament. This is a limited monarchy from this point forward, bars Roman Catholic from ever taking the throne. Britain is not quite a democracy yet, it's an oligarchy, so the wealthy elite holds the majority of the power, but as you guys know today, the monarchy is not really powerful. So, I mean, the Queen's there. She don't really do much. I mean, they do charities. It's kind of cool. You know, Miss Saunders, I like the Queen. It's just my thing. All right. Here's a really great video if you want to watch something about the Glorious Revolution. Watch it on my website. Then here's something about absolutism in Central Europe. Shows you a little bit Prussian territory. It's all, you know, kind of Netherlands, Belgium, France, Russia, getting close to it. All right, 30 Years' War. This begins when the Bohemian King Ferdinand tries to suppress the Protestants. If you're going, okay, Bohemian King, the Bohemian King had several other titles, in case you want to know. He was also known as the Holy Roman Emperor, the King of Bohemia, the King of Germany, and the King of Hungary. The Holy Roman Emperor and the King of Germany, you got both titles up until the 18th century. It's kind of weird. So the Protestant nobleman threw out two of Ferdinand's royal officials out of a castle window. Starts a Protestant revolt. So all of Europe gets involved. Basically, anything with Germany that happens, as we know, anyone with some high school knowledge of world history knows, once Germany starts something, all of Europe gets involved. So Ferdinand's named the Holy Roman Empire. They tried to impose religious uniformity. Roughly 1/5 of Germanic population lost due to the war. 8 million die overall. But in 1648, they signed the Peace of Westphalia, breaking up a big chunk of the Holy Roman Empire. And there's this idea of sovereign states that starts to grow. That basically, if you're going, why do I need to know the 30 Years' War? It's just this idea of what is the result of it? Sovereign states. You might want to know that. All right. This is a good little video. This kind of explains that too. If that little explanation I gave you didn't help, watch it on the website. Another thing of the effects. Netherlands are going to obtain independence from Spain and become a world economic power. France becomes a European leader, and Sweden becomes a military power. Gunpowder empires. Ooh, I know you guys know this. We did our Anatomy of an Empire project. So let's talk about this briefly. Self-defense is extremely important. We've got the Ottoman, the Safavid, the Mughal, the Russian, and the Manchu. They are relatively large. They're expensive. They focus on agriculture, not industry. Many are located in arid and uninhabitable areas. They usually involve forced labor. Power is centralized. They collect taxes through tax farming systems. And between 1500 and 1800, they had the largest administrative and economic systems because they were more of a threat to each other. They are very nomadic in the steppes areas. Urbanization starts moving in. They switch to gunpowder technology away from mounted warriors. They're not really left behind, but they're greater than Europe. So let's talk about the Ottomans real fast. 1299, Osman I takes control of a small pastoral tribe of Turks south of the Byzantine Empire. He continually raided the Byzantines, and though he kept losing, this allowed him to get more people to join him. So 1453, we have Mehmed II. He conquers Constantinople, and ending the Byzantine Empire and setting the Ottomans as the foremost power in the Middle East. So we know our spiced tea, right? Social, they're patriarchal. Women have more rights there than in many European societies at the time. Women could own land, obtain a divorce, and testify in court. So they are patriarchal, but compared to everywhere else in Europe, they had more rights. Women often controlled the household. They could go out with neighboring women in the market, in the park. If they had multiple wives, they would stay in a harem. A harem is a separate part of a Muslim household reserved for wives, concubines, and female servants. But you would only have a harem if you were a rich man. The political part, they were a large bureaucracy. They expanded borders for protection. Of course, they used guns and gunpowder, hence the Gunpowder Empire. They have the Devashirme system, and they ruled through locals in conquered lands. They had the tribute system. One of their big leaders was Suleiman the Magnificent. He was one of their most powerful rulers from 1520 to 1566. He expands borders to its largest size. He creates a unified law code, including a law to stop killing the Jews. He institutes freedom of religion, builds churches and synagogues, continues to welcome the Jews from Spain and the Spanish Inquisition, and he does have the jizya, so that was the tax on the non-Muslims. So you can live there, just pay a tax. So what's their cultural? They have the millet system. This is what allows them to have the freedom of religion. So why do I have something that says state versus federal? Here's how it can be compared to state versus federal. Religious communities can rule themselves under their own laws, so that's like a state, as long as these laws don't conflict with the Muslim law. So pretend it's like a federal law. So you could be a Jewish person living there, as long as you don't conflict with a long-standing Muslim law, then you're okay. As long as you recognize Suleiman and Ottoman law as grand law, you're okay living there. Art and literature flourish, especially under Suleiman. It's a very diverse population. Economic, they're an agricultural society. They're slow to adapt to innovations, and as a result, Europe is going to surpass them. Technology, they actually built a Constantinople observatory. They carry out many astronomical observations. Medicine is practiced everywhere. They believed in preventative health care. They created mechanical watches and clocks and cannons. Of course, they had cannons. Here's the Safavid Empire, a little bit northeast of the Ottoman Empire, northwest of the Mughals. We'll get to that in a minute. That's a nice little video on Safavid. You can watch on the website. Main difference, you need to know this difference more than anything. It's going to pop up. I promise you it's going to pop up. Ottomans are Sunni, Safavids are Shia. They both practice Islam, but one is Sunni and one is Shia. So the main conflict is the land on the eastern Mediterranean. In 1534, the Ottomans take Baghdad. In the Second War, gave Ottomans more Safavid land, including their capital city. So in 1602, Ottomans were distracted with wars against Habsburgs in Europe, so Safavids retook much of the land. As you can tell, it's basically a give or take when they keep fighting over land. The Safavids retake Baghdad. It's a huge blow to the Ottoman ego. Safavids use this to take almost all of modern-day Iraq. More and more going back and forth. They do sign a treaty in 1639. This draws boundaries between empires. This is what's important. This boundary line is today's boundary line between Iraq and Iran. So that's why Iraq and Iran both have completely different religions. They both practice Islam, but one is Sunni and one is Shia. But this made Ottomans the power in the region. So here's the Mughal dynasty. Here's a nice little crash course on the Mughals. Sorry about that, jumped ahead. All right, here's the Taj Mahal. It's commissioned in 1632 by the Emperor Shah Jahan. It was a tomb for his favorite wife who died in childbirth. It is completely symmetrical, except for the tombs of Shah Jahan and his wife. Those two are not symmetrical. So there are two theories, but the one that I like the most is, did his son do this to him on purpose to get back his dad? So his son was Aurangzeb. I might be saying that completely wrong. Did he do this despite his father? Since in the Quran it says that any type of ostentation at the time of death is forbidden. So did his son do this tomb of his father and his wife asymmetrical as a way to say, Dad, you should not have done this? Who knows? It's just a theory. We really don't know. So here's a nice little video on the Taj Mahal if you don't get a chance to visit it. Akbar I, he was Akbar the Great. He was a Mughal emperor, from 1556 to 1605. You could say the late 16th century. He spread borders to the greatest extent, and he was all about religious freedom. He'd have those roundtable discussions on religion with Hindus, Christians, Jews, and other religions. He encouraged scholars, painters, poets, and musicians to practice. The Mughal-Safavid wars. There were 3 wars fighting over this region. You don't even know the dates of the war, but it comes down to fighting over pieces of land in modern-day Afghanistan. All right, it's time to go over to Russia. There's lots of change. Poland was the largest state, Hungary second, many smaller states, but as you can tell, 300 years later, Poland's, it's just all changed, all changed. Lots of division. Look at that, all this different religion, all about religion. So this is all that's happening over there. There's one dominant group that dominates the state, many lesser ethnic groups subject to assimilation, exploitation by the largest ruling group. So there's lots of people living in this area. All right, so you have all these ethnic groups that you can see. It's just good to kind of have this idea of so many different groups living in all this land. And even today, Russia's huge, the landmass. Not everyone lives there. Most of it's covered in ice. Ethnic groups of the Balkans, Romania, present-day Romania, Croatia. Basically, it's a lot of diversity. Russia region incorporates all of these ethnic groups, so what could this lead to later? Oh, I don't know. Maybe some wars? Just a guess. All right, so 1450, they're still under the Golden Horde rule, tributary state. The Golden Horde is still, and now Muslim. Rule is getting weaker each year. And Russia is seen as primitive and backwards. They miss the Renaissance. They miss Reformation. They're not quite European. They're not quite Asian, and the Mongols basically have them stuck in time. Largest and most influential of the Russian principalities was Grand Princes Ivan the First and Ivan the Second grow wealthy off of tribute. They raise and train an army, and Ivan the Third, also known as Ivan the Great, he does. He refuses to pay tribute. The Golden Horde sends an army, and Ivan crushes them. This is a little picture of the gathering of the Russian lands. So around this time, the Byzantine Empire is collapsing. So Ivan III marries the daughter of the last Byzantine emperor. They model the government after the Byzantines. They call Moscow the Third Rome, and they actually call their rulers czars, which is Caesar in Russian. They head to both of the government and the Orthodox Church. So now your leader of the government is also the leader of the church. They view themselves as the successors to Rome. Here's a nice little video on Ivan the Terrible. He dies with no heir, but it leads to 15 years of political turmoil in Russia. There were numerous czars, numerous imposters to the throne, and lots of peasant revolts. Then it goes to Mikhail Romanov. Through marriage, he was the grandnephew to Ivan IV. In 1613, nobles in Russia held a national assembly to decide who's going to take the title. They choose a 17-year-old guy named Mikhail Romanov. If you remember Anastasia, the princess, of course, that nice little movie that we always think is Disney, but it wasn't Disney. When the little girl that everyone thought was alive, the family that dies in 1918, they're related to this gentleman, all the way back, Mikhail Romanov. So Peter the Great, he's a leader. He has two goals, westernization and getting a warm water port. The first goal is he wants to be better than the West, so he copies the West. He's fascinated with the modern technology because remember, they've been stuck in the past. So he goes in disguise. He goes west in 1697 for 18 months. He's so tall, though, that everywhere he goes, people go, yeah, we know who you are. He travels to Spain, France, England, and the Netherlands. He observes how they built their ships, their navy, their army, their dress, their daily life. And when he returns, he basically imposes Western dress on everyone. He says, if you have a beard, I'm going to tax you. He gives them all the Western army, and he wants a navy. In order to get a navy, though, he needs a warm water port. So he wants a port on the Black Sea, but the Ottomans have this. He wants to go to the Baltic Sea, but Sweden have that. So they do the Great Northern War. They gain the land of the Baltic Sea. They gain prestige around the world. Sweden had one of the strongest militaries in Europe, but they won it. So they get cocky and they attack the Ottomans because they're like, if we can beat Sweden, we can beat them too. But the Ottomans were better, so they kind of, lose. So on new land by Baltic Sea, Peter built St. Petersburg. He was running by names. He's like, my name looks great. Models after a great Western European cities. It even has a small Versailles. It was known as the Window on the West. 1732 to 1918 is the capital of Russia. In 1721, Peter names emperor of all Russia, and it officially begins the Western Empire. All right, so Catherine the Great. After Peter, several czars and czarinas, czarina is the female version of czar, kept this vision of being Western and conquering. Catherine II was an enlightened absolute monarch. She wanted the absolute power, but of course she wanted to continue being Western. This included this enlightened thinking. Peasants wanted more rights, and they wanted to end serfdom. Remember, they still have feudalism. So Pugachev was his former lieutenant in the Russian army, and he organizes a peasant revolt. And we've talked about this in the last video I just did. So wanted this rebellion. Government didn't recognize the extent of the revolt. They basically ignore it. And if you ignore a problem, it will keep growing. The rebellion takes over a year to put down, ending in his execution. Remember, his people ended up getting so tired of him, they turned him over to the government. Catherine's terrified, though, because as this is going on, you have the Glorious Revolution, and you have the American Revolution is going on across the ocean, but she's still going, I keep hearing about this, and this is a hot mess. So she says, you know what? This westernization is too much. We're ending it. She wants to limit foreign influence because the more people come in with their ideas, they're going to give her people ideas, and she doesn't. That's the last thing she wants. She doesn't want ideas because that's going to make them want to rebel. That's going to make people think that what they have isn't good enough. And she thinks everything's just fine because she's in power. So, of course, everything's just great. So the empire is going to grow. Just nice to know it gets bigger. And now let's go over to China just real fast. This is that Chinese dynasty song. It's just a little bit different. If you just want to watch it again, you're more than welcome to. They drive out the Mongols in 1368. We know about the Mings. Zheng He, we've talked about him so much. They expand the Grand Canal. They go back into the meritocracy. That's the civil service exam. If you have any questions about that, of course, you can ask me at any time. In the second half of the dynasty, they begin to fall behind Europe in terms of their technological advances. Remember, they started way before everybody else. They had the compass in the 11th century. They started the paper thing. They started the whole gunpowder. Remember, when you're blowing off fireworks on July 4th, you have the Chinese to think about that. But then after a while, they start to slow down. So they have some rebellion, they got the Portuguese silver trade, and they have a little ice age. You do need to know they have a little ice age that really does slow them down. There was also the earthquake that we talked about. Well, it was in the video. You really need to watch. We did that little Ed puzzle on it. So beginning in 1660, the Manchurian tribes begin to unite under this guy. He's known as the Great Qing. They rebel against the Ming government. 1644, the Qing dynasty officially recognized. Southern Ming remains until 1912, but it's scattered and not united. And if they're not united, they can't really take over. So, nice little video if you want to watch this. It's really nice and quick. 3-minute history. The Qing dynasty is the last Chinese dynasty. They expand their borders. They're extremely prosperous through the 1700s due to foreign trade. There's like a large imbalance. The rest of the world wanted their silk and tea and porcelain, but the Qing didn't want too much of what the world was offering. So they're just kind of like, you got anything better? No? They have this thing called woodblock printing. It becomes widespread and better. You guys read a little bit about that. Beginning in the late 18th century, Europeans do make their way to China. Of course, Chinese go, I don't really like what you guys are selling. The foreigners were only allowed to dock at one port, the port of Canton, and they wanted to keep foreigners out of inner China. Of course, everyone knows what's happening during this time. Europeans are not doing a great job everywhere else they're going. So the Chinese are hearing about this and they're going, maybe you guys don't, you may not be welcome here. And you guys have seen this video. I would say maybe watch it one more time just to kind of give you guys a little refresher. Again, you can watch all these little videos up on the website. This is the last of this slide. If you have any questions, you can come to my class before or after. Remember, your test is popping up. I hope this review helped, and just make sure you're doing your readings. All right, have a great day. Bye.